At exactly 2:17 a.m., the lantern light trembled in my hand, and for the first time in my life, I felt fear inside my own home. Not the kind of fear that creeps in with strange noises or shadows on the wall. This fear had a face, blonde hair, perfectly manicured nails, and the cold, sneering smile of a woman who wasn't supposed to be there. Karen. She stood in my root cellar like she owned it, surrounded by my potato bins, canned goods, and the old wooden shelf my father had built with splintering hands years before. The air was thick with damp earth and the bitter, metallic scent of rusted tools. She didn't even look startled that I had found her. If anything, she looked annoyed. "You really should lock this place better," she said, crossing her arms, eyes scanning me like she was a victim. I froze. My heart slammed into my ribs so hard I thought she could hear it. For a split second, my brain refused to catch up with reality. Why was Karen in my root cellar at 2 a.m? That question hit me like a lightning strike, because this wasn't the first time she'd crossed a line. It wasn't even the 10th. She'd been a problem in our small town for years. The kind of neighbor who made complaints about birds being too loud, about fences being 3 inches too high, about my porch light being aggressively bright. She'd called the county inspector when I fixed my own roof. Twice. She'd tried to get my old oak tree labeled a public hazard so it could be cut down. But this was different. This was trespassing. This was something darker. I lowered the lantern slightly, light flickering across her face. She looked pale. Dirt streaked the cuffs of her expensive sweater. Her shoes, ridiculous little white sneakers, were coated with mud. "What are you doing in my cellar?" I asked, and my voice didn't even sound like it belonged to me. She tilted her head, lips tightening. "That's none of your business." That was the moment something inside me cracked. None of my business? She was in my house. Under my house. Something was wrong. I thought about the strange things that had been happening over the last few weeks. The garden tools going missing. The fence rails that kept coming loose. The faint footprints in my backyard after rain. Too small to be raccoons. Too deliberate to be wild animals. And then there was the soil. My tomato plants had started dying for no reason. The roots looked tampered with. Someone had been digging. My eyes moved slowly behind her, to the far corner of the cellar. That's when I saw it. A fresh mound of dirt. Dark, wet, and badly packed. Not like the rest of the hard, settled earth. A loose shovel lay beside it. My shovel. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like it hit the dirt floor. "What did you put there?" I whispered. Karen laughed. Actually laughed. It was sharp and short, like breaking glass. "You're being dramatic," she said. "It's just dirt." Just dirt. Yeah, right. The lantern shook in my hand as I took a slow step forward. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get out, to call someone, anyone. But my feet wouldn't move. Because suddenly, I remembered something else. 3 weeks ago, my dog had gone missing. No paw prints leaving the yard. No tracks in the woods. No sound. Just gone. My voice came out like gravel. "Did you hurt something?" Karen's eyes flicked toward the dirt pile. Just for a second. But it was enough. My lungs felt like they collapsed in on themselves. The cellar felt smaller. The air felt thicker. And then she did something I'll never forget. She stepped toward the stairs. Toward me. "You're overreacting," she said calmly. "And you're going to move so I can leave." My hand drifted back without me thinking. The cellar door rope. The old wooden latch. Rotten wood. Rusted hinges. My mind raced. If she left, she'd never answer my questions. She'd never tell me the truth. She'd never face anything she'd done. My fingers closed around the rope. The hook of fear twisted into something else. Anger. A slow, burning, years-old anger. She'd pushed me for years. Called the cops on me. Tried to get my land taken. Tried to make me look dangerous in my own town. And now she was under my house, digging into my earth, standing between me and answers. She stepped closer. "Move," she said again, her voice sharper now. "Or I'll scream." That was when the question formed in my mind, dark and dangerous and impossible to ignore. If I closed the door now, how far would I go to uncover the truth? The lantern flickered. My hand tightened on the rope, and the cellar door creaked. The moment the cellar door slammed shut sounded louder than thunder. The wooden planks hit the frame with a crack that vibrated through the floorboards and into my bones. Dust drifted down from the ceiling. The lantern flame flickered wildly, throwing jagged shadows that twisted across the packed dirt walls like living things. On the other side of that door, Karen started screaming. Not polite neighborhood problem screams. Not the kind of fake panic she'd use on the phone with the county inspectors. These were raw, furious, animal sounds, fists pounding against the wood, boots slamming into the door over and over. "Open this," she shrieked. "You can't do this." My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped the rope. I stood on the kitchen floor above the cellar, staring at the iron latch that I'd pulled into place without really thinking. My chest felt too tight, like the air itself had become heavier. What had I just done? I hadn't planned it. There'd be no dramatic build-up, no big speech. Just a sickening realization that I was standing between a woman and answers I might never get if she walked away. Her words echoed through the thick wood. "I'll call the police." I let out a humorless breath. Good. That gave me a strange kind of control. If she called, then everything would come out sooner. If she screamed, neighbors might hear. If she panicked, she might make mistakes. I leaned down and pressed my ear lightly to the door. Her breathing was frantic. I could hear her pacing in the cramped space, her footsteps scraping along the hard-packed earth. "Why were you digging in my cellar?" I called through the door. Silence. Then a scoff. Even through the wood, I could hear it. "You're insane," she shouted back. "You've lost your mind." Classic Karen. Blame the victim. Flip the narrative. Pretend she had zero reason to be there at 2 a.m. with my shovel and a fresh mound of date. I stood slowly and walked over to my kitchen table, where the old cordless phone rested. My fingers hovered over it. Should I call the sheriff first? Or should I dig? The thought crept in quietly, like a whisper from somewhere I didn't like. My eyes drifted toward the back door, toward the cellar entrance from the outside. If something was buried, I grabbed my boots and jacket without thinking. The night air was cold and sharp, biting through my sleeves as soon as I stepped outside. The moon hung low behind thick clouds, turning the land into a blurry mess of shadows. The backyard felt different now. Wrong. Like it was hiding secrets under every inch of soil. I moved carefully toward the stone doors that covered the outside cellar entrance. The metal groaned when I pulled them open. The dirt smelled stronger down here. Wet. Freshly turned. I stepped inside the cellar through the outside entrance, far from the door I'd locked her behind. The lantern light danced across the walls, and my eyes landed immediately on the disturbed earth in the corner. Up close, it was worse. The dirt wasn't just loose. It was shredded, clawed at, dug in a hurry. Whoever had done it hadn't been calm. I knelt and pressed my fingers into the soil. It was still damp, still soft, still fresh. My dog's face flashed in my mind. His muddy paws, the way he used to sleep by the back steps, the way he'd bark at shadows and chase wind. I swallowed hard and started digging. I didn't know what I wanted to find, or what I was terrified of finding. I just dug, fistfuls of dirt, crumbling soil under my nails. My breath came fast and uneven. Behind me, through the thick ceiling, I could still hear muffled shouting. Karen hadn't stopped. She just kept screaming my name. I hit something solid after about a foot. A dull thud echoed in the cramped cellar. My heart stopped. Slowly, carefully, I brushed away the remaining dirt. Wood. Not bone. Not cloth. Wood. A small, rotting wooden box, tied with thin twine. My hands hovered over it for a long moment before I untied the string. Inside were papers, crinkled, folded, stained by moisture and time. I pulled one out and unfolded it slowly. A map, my property, crossed out in red ink. Notes scribbled in shaky handwriting. Complaint history. Leverage points. Witness statements. My stomach twisted. This wasn't about a dog. This wasn't about animals. This was about me. Footsteps stumped overhead. Karen's fist hit the door again. "You think this makes you powerful," she yelled through the floor. "You think you can just trap me like this?" I barely heard her. I was staring at a photograph now. Me, pulling into my driveway. taken from the tree line. Another photo, me talking to old Mr. Hadley by the fence. Another, my back door, late at night, lights on. Who had taken these? Who had printed these? I flipped through more pages. She doesn't act alone. Needs authority involved. Build case slowly. Make him look unstable. The word unstable was circled. Hard. My hands started shaking harder than they had when I grabbed the rope. She wasn't just a nosy neighbor. She'd been building something. A file. A case. A story. On me. I heard something heavy shift above. Then her voice, lower now. Quieter. Less confident. You shouldn't have gone digging, she said. My heart skipped. How did she know? Then I heard it. Not her fists. Not her footsteps. But tapping. Light. Rhythmic. On the other side of the door. Like she was testing something. The wood. The hinges. The latch. I slowly stood, clutching the box to my chest. And that's when I understood. Karen wasn't scared. She'd expected to be trapped. She'd planned for it. And suddenly, the silence between her screams felt more dangerous than the noise ever had. Because now I had the truth in my hands. And she had time. And time was exactly what scared me most. Silence is louder than screaming. That was the first thing I understood as I climbed back up the cellar steps, clutching that rotting wooden box like it was a life raft. Karen had gone quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that crawls under your skin and makes your heart forget how to beat properly. The cellar door looked normal. That's what terrified me. The latch was still in place. The rope untouched. The wood solid and unmoved. But there were no shouts anymore. No threats. No banging. Nothing. I leaned down slowly and pressed my ear against the door. Breathing. Not panicked. Not frantic. Calm. Slow. Controlled. She was waiting. And somehow, that felt worse than any scream. How long were you planning this? I asked, my voice low, barely more than a whisper through the thick planks. Her laugh came from the other side, soft and flat. You're smarter than you look, she said. Took you long enough. My fingers tightened around the box. You were spying on me, I said, taking pictures, writing reports. You made it very easy, she replied. You're predictable. That word settled into me like a sickness. Predictable. I thought of the papers inside the box, of the red lines and scribbled notes. Who else? I asked. There was a pause. Then, does it matter? Yes. God, yes, it mattered. The house creaked around me. All were complaining as a night wind pushed against the walls. Everything felt fragile suddenly. Thin. Like one wrong breath would crack it all apart. A faint scraping sound came through the door. A soft metallic whisper. She was doing something. Scratch. Drag. Tap. I pictured her in the cramped cellar, back straight, calm hands working at something small and hidden. You brought tools down there, didn't you? I said. Silence. That was answer enough. My blood went cold. I stepped back from the door, instinct screaming at me for the first time since I'd shut it. This wasn't just trespassing. This wasn't even stalking. This felt procedural, planned, a trap. I turned and moved quickly through the kitchen, setting the wooden box down on the table. My hands shook as I dumped the contents onto the scratched surface. Photographs, maps, notes. One document slipped free and unfolded on its own. A type page, official-looking, headings, bullet points, and a title, Behavioral Escalation Log. I swallowed. Dates were listed. Times. Small incidents I didn't even remember. Arguing at the hardware store, slamming my truck door too hard, raising my voice during a fence dispute. Each moment twisted, rewritten, made darker, made unstable. My hands curled into fists. She wasn't gathering truth. She'd been writing a story, and now I was living inside it. Down below, I heard the scraping stop. Then a soft knock came from behind the door. Not frantic, not loud. 3 calm taps. Tap, tap, tap. You should take the deal, Karen called through the wood. My heart thudded so hard I thought I'd black out. What deal? She exhaled slowly, like she was savoring something. Open the door, she said. We tell them you panicked, that you misunderstood, that you locked me in because you were scared. My jaw tightened. And in return, you walk away, she said. You pretend you never found those little papers. You get to keep your house, your land, your reputation. I stared at the files in front of me. You built a case against me, I said, for years, and now you're offering me mercy. Another pause. Her voice turned colder. I'm offering you survival. The word hung in the air. Survival. I walked slowly back to the cellar door. Slowly, like I was approaching a wild animal that looked calm but wasn't. You don't sound scared at all, I said. I'm not, she replied. Something shifted in the wood. A new sound. A faint grinding. Metal biting into metal. My eyes dropped to the latch. The old iron piece that sat across the door. It was moving. Not breaking. Not snapping. Moving. Sliding. My breath caught. She wasn't trying to smash her way out. She was unlocking it. She'd sabotaged the latch while digging. Planned in advance. I reached for it just as it moved a fraction of an inch. Stop, she said calmly. I froze. Open it yourself, she said. I'll let it happen slowly. My hand hovered in midair. 1,000 thoughts slammed into me at once. If I opened it, she'd play the victim. If I didn't, she'd come out anyway. The latch shifted again, millimeter by millimeter. The long years of tension between us pressing on that tiny piece of metal. Finally, I grabbed the handle and pulled the door open. The cellar light spilled upward, and for the first time since I'd met her that night, Karen looked surprised. But she wasn't alone. That's when I saw the second shadow moving behind her. The moment the door swung open, the air that had been trapped below rushed out, carrying with it the damp, earthy smell of disturbed soil. Karen stumbled backward as if I had slapped her with a gust of wind. Her eyes widened, not with fear, but with something else. Recognition, maybe even panic. And then I saw it. A second figure crouched in the far corner of the root cellar. Tall, broad-shouldered, almost blending into the shadows of the shelves stacked with jars of preserves and potatoes. I froze, lantern held tight in trembling hands. My pulse pounded like a hammer against my ribs. "Who?" I stammered, but before I could finish, the figure rose. Slowly, a man, late 30s, messy dark hair, jeans smeared with dirt, hands covered in soil, and eyes that didn't hesitate, didn't flinch, just stared at me like a predator calculating its prey. Karen stepped in front of him as if I couldn't see them both. Her lips curled into a smirk. "You really think you're clever, don't you?" she said, her voice eerily calm. I gripped the lantern tighter. "What is this? Who is he?" Karen tilted her head. "You want the truth? Or do you want the illusion?" My stomach turned. The box of papers, the photographs, the maps, they suddenly made more sense. She hadn't been working alone. This man, he was part of it. Part of the scheme that had been unraveling my life for months. "What scheme?" I asked, my voice rising. "What have you done?" Her smirk widened. "Oh, you'll see soon enough." The man stepped forward now, and the dim lantern light caught the glint of something metallic in his hand. I flinched, but it wasn't a weapon. It was another box, slightly smaller, sealed, and heavy. "Part of my collection," he said quietly, almost casually, placing it carefully on the floor. I helped Karen gather evidence. Evidence. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. It wasn't just spying. It wasn't just harassment. It had been methodical, deliberate, years of careful observation, documentation, and planning. And here it was, all in this damp, claustrophobic cellar. I took a step back, trying to digest the weight of the moment. "So all of this, you've been planning to ruin me." Karen laughed softly. "Not ruin. Correct. Align. Make sure you stay in line." "Stay in line." I almost shouted. I don't even know what that means. The man crouched near the pile of boxes and papers, picking up one of the old photographs. "It means," he said, showing me an image of me standing in my driveway, "that you can't act without consequences. Every move you make, every careless word, every little mistake is recorded." I felt the floor tilt beneath me. Years of what I thought were private moments, small joys, conversations with neighbors, even quiet nights alone in my home. They were all catalogued, judged, manipulated. You've crossed the line, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though anger and fear battled for dominance in my chest. You've invaded my life, my home, my everything. Karen shrugged. And yet, here you are. She gestured toward the boxes. You found one of the secrets. The question is, what will you do with it? Her words hit me like ice water. The papers, the photographs, the maps, they were power. She had spent years building them, orchestrating every angle. And now, in my hands, they were a choice. A weapon. A key. My mind raced. If I exposed her, I could destroy her reputation in an instant. But if I acted too rashly, it would backfire. She knew the law. She had built a case that made me look unstable, possibly dangerous. And if I don't? I asked, my hand shaking around the lantern. Karen's smirk darkened. Then you remain trapped. Trapped by your own fear. By the things you didn't see coming. By the rules I set while you slept. A low, deliberate laugh escaped me. Years of harassment, of manipulation, of silent sabotage, all of it came back in a wave so fierce it made my hands tremble. For the first time, I felt the deep, familiar surge of something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Revenge. I looked at the two of them. Calm, controlled, arrogant in the way only someone who believes they are untouchable can be. And then I asked a question that had been forming in my mind ever since I first found her in the cellar. How far would you go to protect your little empire? The man tilted his head. Karen's smirk didn't falter. They exchanged a brief, knowing glance, silent communication passing between them like electricity. Far enough, Karen said finally. And now, you're going to learn the rules. Something clicked in me then. Something dangerous, powerful. Years of being pushed, mocked, ignored, they hadn't made me weak. They had made me vigilant. They had made me careful. And now, with these boxes and this evidence, I had a choice. I swallowed hard. My pulse raced. The dim light of the lantern flickered across the packed date, the wooden shelves, and the two people who had underestimated me. I took a slow step forward, toward them, toward the boxes, toward the truth. The night felt alive with tension. Every shadow in the cellar seemed to lean in closer, listening. Every sound, the drip of water, the creak of wood, the soft hum of the wind outside, was magnified. Karen's eyes followed my every movement. The man mirrored her, a silent guardian of secrets. And then I realized the game had shifted. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a player. And if they thought the darkness they had built around me was enough to hold me, they were about to find out how far I could go. Because now, it wasn't just about survival. It was about revenge. There's a quiet moment right before everything breaks. That was what filled the cellar now, a strange, stretched silence that felt like it could snap at any second. Karen and the man watched me. I watched them. The lantern flame shook slightly, reacting to air that barely moved. They thought they'd cornered me. They were wrong. I stepped closer to the boxes, letting my boot scrape slowly across the dirt. I kept my face controlled, blank, like I was processing, like I was scared. Inside, though, my thoughts were moving fast. You tracked me, I said carefully. Documented me. All this time. Karen folded her arms. Now you're catching up. I crouched down and picked up the small wooden box again, flipping through the papers as if I were just now understanding their meaning. Maps, notes, dates, times. I let my fingers tremble on purpose. The man's eyes stayed locked on my hands. Good. That was exactly where I wanted his attention. You really think this makes me scared? I asked quietly, knowing you've been watching me. Karen tilted her head. You should be. I nodded slowly and smiled. It was a small thing, barely noticeable, but I saw the way her eyes narrowed. That tiny change made her uneasy. I stood up and walked toward the cellar stairs. Slowly, casually, like I'd given up. Fine, I said. You win. I'll play by your rules. That surprised her. I could tell by the way she shifted her weight. By the way, the man straightened slightly, tightening his grip on the metal box. "You're going to let us go?" Karen asked. I stopped at the bottom step and looked at her. "I'm going to make a call," I said. "You want power? You should hear what real power sounds like." I climbed the stairs, feeling their eyes burning into my back. Every step felt like walking a wire stretched over a drop. When I reached the top, I didn't close the door. I left it open. On purpose. In the kitchen, I pulled the phone from the wall and stared at the buttons for a second, letting my hand shake just enough to sell the act. Then I dialed, but not the sheriff. I dialed the old number I hadn't used in years. "Hello," a rough voice answered. "It's me," I said quietly. "I need a favor." A pause. Then, "You sure?" "I'm very sure." I hung up and walked back to the cellar steps. Karen and the man were whispering now. Not frantic, not panicked, but alert. Their hunter's instinct were waking up. "What was that?" Karen asked. "A second opinion," I said. We waited. Minutes felt like hours. Every sound, wood popping, wind howling faintly through the cracks in the foundation, vibrated through my nerves. Then headlights washed through the small cellar window. A truck, an old one. The engine growled like something with teeth. The man turned sharply toward the light. "You called someone." "You said I was predictable," I replied calmly. "You should have checked who I used to be." Boots crunched on the gravel outside. A knock on the front door. Slow, heavy, confident. I didn't move toward it right away. I held Karen's gaze. "You wanted to control the story," I said. "Now someone else is walking into it." She stared at me, trying to find a crack in my plan. There wasn't one. I opened the front door. Cold night air rushed in along with the smell of oil and dust. A tall silhouette stood outside. "You alone?" the voice asked. "For now," I said, "but not for long." The figure stepped into the light. An old friend, a man I'd helped years ago when no one else would. Someone who didn't trust cops. Someone who hated manipulation. He looked past me, toward the open cellar door. "You finally figured it out," he said. Inside, Karen moved. Fast. I heard the metal box drop. A sharp clang against stone. Then footsteps, quick, calculated, heading for the outside cellar exit. "Your guess is trying to leave," my friend said. I stepped aside. Let her think she's winning. The trap wasn't the cellar. The trap wasn't the latch. The trap was a yard. Motion lights flicked on, flooding the backyard with white light. Shadows jumped. Shapes moved. A crash. The sound of someone stumbling. A curse. Karen's voice, sharp and furious. She burst around the corner of the house, running hard, right into the waiting truck headlights. My friend raised his phone. Camera rolling. "Say something," he told her. She froze. For the first time, her expression wasn't smug. It wasn't calm. It was exposed. Behind her, the man from the cellar appeared, slower, breathing hard, eyes wide as he realized what was happening. Lights. Witnesses. Cameras. Not a story they controlled. I stepped into the yard, cold air filling my lungs. "You built a case," I said. "So did I." Sirens rose in the distance. Real ones this time. Karen's eyes flicked from the camera to the truck to me. "You planned this," she said. I shook my head. "You planned it first," I replied. "I just finished it." The sirens grew louder, closer, and for the first time since she'd stepped into my cellar, Karen looked like she understood something very simple. She wasn't the hunter anymore. She was evidence. The sirens cut through the night like a blade, sharp and unrelenting. Red and blue lights flashed across the yard, washing the trees and the cellar entrance in harsh color. Karen froze, her eyes darting from the approaching vehicles to me, then back to the man who had been her accomplice, the one who had thought he was untouchable. I stepped closer, boots crunching on the gravel, feeling the solid weight of every year I'd been pushed, every slight, every insult, every calculated move to destabilize me. Tonight, it all balanced itself on this moment. The sheriff arrived first, stepping out of the patrol car with a flashlight swinging in a steady arc. His eyes immediately took in the scene, the open cellar, The strewn boxes, the trembling papers, and two very guilty-looking people caught red-handed. "What's going on here?" he demanded, voice authoritative, cutting through the tension like a knife. I let the lantern swing slightly in my hand, casting jagged shadows across the yard. "This," I said, holding up the wooden box with the photographs and maps, "is what's been happening while everyone pretended it wasn't." Karen opened her mouth, but no words came. For once, her rehearsed offenses, her sly excuses, her quick manipulation, nothing worked. She looked small, exposed. The man behind her stepped back, now unsure, a shadow of arrogance replaced with panic. The sheriff noticed him immediately, moving closer with careful steps. "Who are you?" the sheriff asked. "An accomplice," I said quietly. Both of them had been planning against me for months, recording everything, trying to manipulate the town and the law. Karen tried to speak, tried to explain, but I shook my head. "No, Karen, you lied, you watched, you plotted, and now it ends." The sheriff nodded, signaling his deputies to move forward. They cuffed the man first, then her. Her eyes flitted toward me one last time, wide and calculating, but the calculations came too late. The trap she had meticulously crafted for me was now hers. Standing in the cold night air, the lantern still warm in my hands, I let the tension drain slowly from my body. Every nerve that had been screaming for revenge and justice finally quieted. I didn't feel the thrill of cruelty, nor the satisfaction of vindictive triumph. I felt relief, the kind that comes after the storm has passed. I walked slowly toward the cellar door. My hands brushed over the wooden walls, over the dote-made floor. The evidence of their plotting was still there, strewn across the shelves and floorboards, but it no longer threatened me. It had become proof. Proof that I had survived, that I had resisted, and that justice could be served even when the law wasn't watching closely enough. The sheriff gave me a nod, as if to confirm what I already knew. They would face consequences. Karen and her accomplice couldn't manipulate the town, couldn't frame me for being unstable, couldn't turn my life upside down. Not tonight. As the deputies loaded the two of them into the patrol car, Karen's eyes locked on mine again. There was no fear left, just disbelief. She had underestimated me. The carefully constructed empire of deceit she had built over months, maybe years, crumbled under the weight of truth. I turned away from the lights and the sirens and stepped back inside the house. The warmth of the kitchen wrapped around me like a shield. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe without a shadow pressing on my chest. The boxes remained on the table. The photographs, maps, and notes were evidence, but they were also reminders that some battles are won not with anger or impulsive rage, but with patience, vigilance, and a refusal to be silenced. I didn't need revenge in its raw, destructive form. I needed justice. And tonight, I had achieved it. I looked out the window toward the cellar. The earth, once disturbed and mysterious, now seemed still and honest. Karen's plan to hide in the shadows, to control and manipulate, had failed. My life, my home, my peace, they remained mine. The night settled around me, quiet now except for the distant echoes of flashing lights and fading sirens. I let the tension ease from my shoulders and finally allowed myself to sit down at the table. The lantern flickered softly, illuminating the box and the evidence of the chaos they had tried to bring into my life. Justice had been served, not violently, not recklessly, but with strategy, patience, and resolve. And as the first hints of dawn began to edge the darkness away, I realized something profound. Revenge is fleeting. Justice is enduring. And tonight, after everything, justice had won. The cellar door creaked gently in the wind, a reminder of the night's confrontation. But for the first time, it was no longer a door of fear. It was a door of survival, of endurance, and of the quiet satisfaction of having faced darkness and emerged stronger. I closed the door slowly, carefully, letting the sound echo through the house like a final punctuation. Then I turned to the morning light creeping through the windows and felt it, the relief, the triumph, the quiet peace of life reclaimed. Karen's schemes, her spying, her manipulation, they would no longer haunt me. The past few months of paranoia, suspicion, and sleepless nights had been terrifying. Yes, but now they were behind me. The shadows of deceit had been confronted and exposed. And as I finally allowed myself to exhale fully, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. No one would ever walk into my life or my home with malicious intent again. Not Karen. Not her accomplice. Not anyone. I had survived. I had uncovered the truth. And in the end, I had ensured that justice, slow, meticulous, and inevitable, had its way. The night was over. The cellar was quiet. And I was free.